September 13, 1981. Team Canada was a hockey powerhouse and the reigning Canada Cup champion. They were looking to defend their title and national pride on home ice against their Cold War rivals, the Soviet Union. The tension of the Cold War was spilling into sports. This was after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which triggered a Western boycott of the 1980 Summer Games in Moscow. 1980 was also the year of the Miracle on Ice. The Soviets were out for redemption, but nobody could have predicted what happened that night. Canada's dream team, stacked with legends like Wayne Gretzky, Guy Lafleur, Mike Bossy, Marcel Dion, and Gilbert Perreault amongst others, was dismantled by the Soviet machine. This loss left Wayne Gretzky in tears and sent shockwaves throughout the hockey world. Did the Soviets dethrone Canada as the preeminent hockey power? This is a look back at that fateful night. Coming into this game, all 5 of the leading scorers in the tournament were Canadian. They were heavily favored to win, and just 4 days prior to the final, smoked the Soviets 7-3 in round-robin play. This probably gave the Canadians false confidence. I say that because the Soviets made a significant line change for the final. Instead of playing their backup goalie Vladimir Mishkin, the Canadians had to face international legend Vladislav Tretiak, who will feature heavily in this video. Let's hop into a time capsule and revisit this game. But before we get into it, please drop a like and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 10,000 and I can do it with your help. This game was played at the old Montreal Forum. Originally, organizers wanted to host it in Toronto, but Leafs owner Harold Ballard was a staunch anti-communist and he didn't want the Soviets in his arena. Toronto's loss was Montreal's gain. Prior to puck drop, a ceremony was held for the late Terry Fox, who passed away earlier that summer. What happened to this country? We used to honor our heroes. Put Terry Fox back in the passport. You feel pure nostalgia listening to the national anthems, particularly the old Soviet anthem. Whenever you hear it, the hair on the back of your neck stands. There is a dark and sinister vibe to it, kind of like the evil empire. There's an element of mystery as well. As the camera pans through the Soviet lineup, who are these players? What are they capable of, and how did they get here? The ceremonial puck drop featured Will, who looks like he just came back from the Upside Down. We also get a look at this Leafs fan. I'd love to hop in a time machine, tell him I'm from 2024, and y'all still haven't won a Stanley Cup. The Soviet starting lineup features the KLM line, Krutov, Larionov, and Makarov. The Soviets like to play with 5-man units, and the KLM line was joined by Vyacheslav Fedosov and Alexei Kasatanov. Not to be outdone, the Canadians sent out the All-Islanders line. Clark Gillies, Brian Trottier, and Mike Bossy, who combined for 26 points heading into the final. Oh, and that was Canada's second line. The first line was Gretzky, Lafleur, and Perreault, but Marcel Dion had to step in for Perreault after he suffered an injury against the Swedes. Early on, you could see the difference in Canadian and Soviet hockey. Here, Mike Bossy dumps the puck into the zone, and the far side winger throws a thundering check on the Soviet defenseman. I don't recall once in the entire period seeing the Soviets dump and chase. They loved hanging onto the puck and trying to make a play. Their system was built on puck possession. Canada, on the other hand, relied a lot on individual efforts. There were a lot of end-to-end dashes like this one by Brian Englum to set up Bob Gainey for a glorious chance. The Soviets were on the ropes and relied on Tretiak to make some huge saves. They were outshot 12-4 in the first, but it didn't feel like that. A lot of Canada's shots were low quality, whereas the Soviets were picking their spots and trying to generate high danger chances. Both teams were not able to capitalize on their chances, and the first period ended scoreless. Heading into the second, the goal for the Canadians was to break down the Soviet wall, no pun intended. They needed to find a way to beat Tretiak, who was on his game. Early on, Marcel Dion tests Tretiak with this slapper, but the Soviet goalie makes a sharp glove save. Guy Lafleur came close after with this shot, but it ticked off of Tretiak's glove and went across the crease. But the turning point was this save by Tretiak. Gainey enters the zone, whips it across to Butch Goring, who finds Engblom, who is absolutely robbed by Tretiak. Canada should have gone up 1-0 here, but Tretiak played like his freedom depended on it. He played as if Tikhonov threatened to send him to the Gulag if they lost. His efforts were rewarded by his teammates. Makarov makes a mad dash down the wing, gets the puck to Krutov, who finds Larionov, who makes no mistake on this shot. 1-0 for the Soviets. This goal gave the Soviets more confidence. They started to play their game and move the puck with speed through the neutral zone. But it was the Canadians who got the next goal. Finally, their forecheck paid off. Trottier gets the puck to Bossy, who centers it to Gillies, and the Islanders line gets Canada on the board. 29 points now for this line in the tournament. Canada was back in it, but not for long. Fedosov activates from the point, takes a massive hit to make a play. A centering pass to Shepelev, who makes no mistake from the slot. 2-1 Soviets. Here's a quick look at a young Scotty Bowman. Looking cool and collected, but Sergei Makarov must have given him a headache all night long. He was the original Russian Rocket, dangling two Hall of Famers Larry Robinson and Denny Potvin before being denied by Mike Liut. Now we know where the phrase Holy Makarov comes from. The Soviets had the best power play in the tournament, and here they show why. Shepelov just parks himself in the Canadian box and snipes one past Liut. 3-1 for the Soviets. Lafleur tried to get the Canadians back in it with this individual effort, but Dion fans on the shot. Afterwards, the Canadians began to show frustration. Trottier can't beat Tretiak. Try saying that 5 times fast. And just tosses Fedosov into the net. The Soviets didn't react at all in these scrums. They maintained their composure throughout the game. This stoic attitude kept them focused on winning. All they had to do now was defend their 3-1 lead in the final frame. In the third, the Soviet speed was too much for the Canadians to handle. Also, the Canadian playing style was not up to par. It was based on individual efforts, and here Lafleur, who had a terrible game, coughs up the puck to Shepelev, who makes the play to Makarov, charges a slot, gets the puck back, and beats Mike Liut. 4-1 for the Soviets. The odds were now completely stacked against the Canadians, who had no answer for the Soviet onslaught. Here's another difference in playing style. Gainey breaks into the Soviet zone going north-south, but he has no support. You rarely see the Soviets enter the zone without a second or third option for the puck carrier. Later on the power play, Gretzky makes a terrible centering pass that was picked off by Krutov. Canada had 4 forwards on the ice out of desperation, and Lafleur is absolutely embarrassed by Krutov in front of his home fans. Krutov makes no mistake, and now it's 5-1. The entire arena is stunned into silence by the Soviets. You could hear a pin drop. You could see it in Canada's play after. They were shell-shocked. They couldn't even connect on simple passes. Another key to victory for the Soviets was neutralizing Gretzky. The Soviets shadowed him all night long, and here you see him getting hammered in the corner. Here, you see as well how the Soviets do an excellent job of collapsing into the slot anytime Gretzky tried to make a play. They managed to keep him off the score sheet. Here's another example of the Soviet style. Kapustin just refuses to dump the puck in. The Soviets value possession so much they were willing to dangle at the opposition blue line till the very end, trying their best to enter the zone with possession. Bowman would probably bench any Canadian that tried to do this. This game was out of hand, but the Soviets wanted to send a message. Larionov splits the D on the power play and buries the puck past Liut. Fans began to exit the stadium. The ones that remained gave Liut a Bronx cheer for this routine save. The aptly named Golikov scored off this backhander to make it 7-1. The Canadians just couldn't wait to hit the showers, but the Soviets weren't done. Their speed was too much, and Skvortsov buried this 2-on-1 to make it 8-1. It was all over. All kisses on the Soviet side. But shock and confusion on the Canadian side. Tretiak was named MVP of the tournament, and for good reason. He finished with a save percentage of .947, which is ridiculous by today's standards. But this was 1981. That's like having a 99 save percentage today. Here, we see the Soviets thankful for Tretiak's performance, grateful to be listening to their anthem, knowing full well they're not getting banished to Siberia. Here are the Soviets receiving the Canada Cup replica. You may be wondering why nobody is lifting it above their heads like the Stanley Cup. Well, it's solid nickel and weighs 90 pounds. The real Canada Cup is even heavier. It weighs 120 pounds and it's on display in Ottawa. The Soviets mistakenly believed that they could take the cup home with them, but they were stopped at the airport by Alan Eagleson, the tournament organizer, and 6 police officers. Eagleson yelled at the Soviets, claiming the trophy was federal property, which it really wasn't. It was just a replica. He claimed that when the Canadians won it in 1976, they didn't even see or touch the trophy. The Soviets were confused, but couldn't really say anything to the police at the airport in Montreal, so they gave the trophy back. They were angry because this violated the tradition of international competition. Canada looked like sore losers. This story has a happy ending though. Gary Smith, Manitoba businessman, recognized that this was shameful behavior and un-Canadian. He raised $10,000 to have another replica made. He stated, "We have the dignity of Canada to live up to. We looked bad in the eyes of the world to put up a trophy and then not give it to the winner. You don't have a trophy for the losers." I wonder what Smith would think of today's generation and participation trophies, but anyways, Smith was true to his word and created a replica that weighed 96 pounds. It was presented to Vladimir Mechuleyev from the Soviet embassy. This was a nice gesture, and the Soviets praised the sportsmanship of the Canadian people. Liut unfortunately became the scapegoat, but this was a team effort. None of the skaters showed up that night. But what if I told you some good came out of this loss? This tournament almost didn't happen due to financial reasons. And if the Canadians had won, it very possibly could have been the last Canada Cup. But nobody wanted to end on a sour note. Eagleson stated, "As far as I'm concerned personally, it's probably preferable that we lost. I think if we had won, I'd have said, to hell with it. Canada wanted revenge. It took 5 years for the second Canada Cup to be held, but only 3 for the third in 1984, where Canada defeated the Swedes in the best-of-3 final. If it weren't for the loss in 81, we would have never gotten the 87 Canada Cup and this iconic moment. That was the greatest international tournament of all time. And it's crazy to think it may not have happened if Canada didn't get smoked 8-1 in 81. When the dust settled, Canada had won 4 out of 5 Canada Cups. The tournament eventually morphed into the World Cup, which hasn't been held since 2016. Luckily for hockey fans, the tournament is tentatively scheduled to return in 2028. If everything goes well, we'll finally get a proper best-on-best international tournament every 4 years. That's all I have for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.